Hello everyone, it's Bridget McNulty here from Sweet Life and Diabetic South Africans. And I'm joined today by Premier Alan Winde. Thank you so much, Premier, for taking the time to speak to us. We're going to be talking about type 2 diabetes and COVID-19 today. So just to give you a little bit of background, Premier, Sweet Life and Diabetic South Africans, we're South Africa's largest online diabetes community, and we provide information and support to people living with diabetes on how to live a perfectly normal, happy, healthy life with the condition. And there has been so much anxiety around diabetes and COVID-19. So we're hoping you can shed some light on that. Could you tell us your diabetes story? How long have you had type 2 diabetes?
Okay, so I was first diagnosed probably now 12 and a half years ago. Oh. And I went for my normal medical, and the doctor said, hang on a second, your sugar's a bit high. I'm worried about this. You better come back tomorrow. So I went back the next day on a starvation visit and tested again. And he said, well, I've got some news for you. You're a diabetic. Sure. And so, I mean, I knew about it because my grandfather was a diabetic. Okay. I remember him when I was a little guy. I mean, he lost his one leg because of diabetes. And,
wow. Okay.
You understand what this means, and so you have a bit of an anxious time. And then I was put on all of these medications. And between my wife and I, we did a whole lot of research. And what really triggered the research was I got given 3 pieces of paper on what my new diet was going to look like. And it kind of contradicted each other. One said fruit juice was fine, and the other one said no fruit juice. And anyway, so I suppose a long story short, what I started doing is I started measuring my sugar every hour. I started a spreadsheet. I started, like I normally do. If you can't have data, you can't manage. So I started finding out what my body did if I ate a slice of brown bread, or if I ate basmati rice or brown rice or ordinary rice. I could tell if I took a spoon of sugar versus eating a slice of toast. I could really see what my body did and how much sugar it produced and what my insulin or my lack of insulin levels were, and what my numbers were going up to. And I was on glucophage or metformin, and then what the research started saying to me is that what I need to do is it's probably going to actually get worse during my life. So what I do now is going to help me in the future. So then what I did is I started doing some exercise, and I started eating properly. And probably it was the lack of exercise and not eating properly that was the trigger. I was probably disposed to it, but the trigger kind of kicked it off. And I mean, I used to wake up too late, not eat breakfast, work too hard and forget lunch. And then on my way home in the evening, I'd probably grab something at the shop on the way home. I'd have supper, and then I'd break for the rest of the night. And then so the cycle would begin again. So I lost 18 kilograms. Wow. And started riding my bicycle. And started eating differently. Low GI, low GL. And that was 12 years ago. And in actual fact, in that first part, I actually then got to a stage where I started dropping the percentage of glucophage and measuring back and measuring until eventually just the eating and the exercise were managing my sugar.
Amazing.
Then obviously there's one other thing that pushes your sugar up, and that's stress. That kind of is something that drives you a bit. Anyway, I changed my lifestyle. Even the whole family changed their lifestyles for me. Because we all eat the same thing now, etc. And then came a few years later this job as being the Premier and COVID-19. And when I was in quarantine twice before, but I never had any symptoms, so I never went for a test. But knowing that I was a diabetic obviously is a risk. And then I got diagnosed. I had flu symptoms. I went and had my test, quarantined myself, and got told that I had now COVID-19. It was very interesting when I went to have my test. As soon as I said to the blood people when they were doing my test that we checked all the boxes, and I said, but I'm a diabetic. It was interesting. They were quite happy to do the test, and they were going to leave it. Yeah. But as soon as I said I was a diabetic, it was interesting for me as how just the new level of interaction came about. And of course, I'd been talking about this in our cabinet meetings 3 times a week in our health department. At that stage in the Western Cape, the comorbidity that claimed the most lives was COVID-19 plus diabetes. Was the biggest risk.
And I think that's why there's been so much fear about it.
Correct. It was interesting for me as well, because suddenly I could be at the other end of the receiving the treatment or receiving the advice.
Yeah.
And what was good was to see the immediate extra focus that the health professionals put onto me. And then the next thing that happened was I started getting the calls and the WhatsApp messages because our system started to kick. So because you were COVID positive, now suddenly the health system linked it through to your number. You would get a call. I got a call from our own department, the department of the Premier, asking if I wanted any kind of psychological advice. How was I feeling?
Wonderful.
That was quite cool. And of course, from the health system. And then I also had my doctor's appointments, because then they said, listen, you better go and see your doctor.
Yeah.
By that stage, it wasn't just symptoms, it was in my chest. It didn't go into my throat or my nose or anything. It went directly into my chest, directly into pneumonia. And so the next thing was, does the doctor put me in hospital or don't they put me in hospital? But I said, let's try and see what we can do at home. And luckily I managed to weather the virus, the higher temperatures and the headaches.
And how were you treating it? Is there special medication, or was it really just how you treat the flu? If you managed to stay at home.
Suddenly, and then what happened was my sugars started going haywire.
Oh, of course, I've heard. So we have we've got a bunch of stories about COVID survivors on our site, and everyone says as soon as you get it, it just goes so high, and there's nothing you can do. Insulin, even if
I don't know what the reasons are. We've gone through, does it stop your beta cells? Does your pancreas shut down? There's a whole lot of things that no one really knows, because everybody actually experiences COVID-19 differently. And treatments are slightly different. But what I was put on immediately was back onto glucophage. I then took, normal flu stuff. I took what I normally take for flu. Although, I don't get sick that often, but when I do, it's like 1 or 2 days and then you're done. You might, cough for a bit further, but that's it. This thing was 2 weeks and still it took even longer than that too. It probably took 5 weeks. I'm only just now not coughing every day. It was,
And did you lose your sense of taste and smell as well?
No, that I didn't lose.
Oh, lucky.
That's quite weird.
That would be the worst to me. Can you imagine? I would be devastated. And I've heard that some people.
I'm through it. I managed to deal with it at home. My wife was with me the whole time, so it's highly contagious. She never showed any symptoms. So we just presume that she got it as well, and my daughter. But it was. We were lucky that not both of us had it, because then probably we would have had to go to hospital. But and my big lesson was, number one, was you've actually got to treat it more seriously than you think. At one stage I remember
it seems to accelerate so quickly. It can be like not that bad.
If you look at the statistics, most people that get it survive. So of course, as a government, you want to focus on saving lives in that small percentage. That's where you focus, but most people survive. So, then you say to yourself, okay, well, if most people survive, well, then why don't we all just get it as quickly as possible? And then we've all had it, and hopefully we've got some herd immunity, and we'll be fine. But after you get it, you change your mind. Rather try not to get it, because it's not nice to get.
No, I know. Anyone I've spoken to had said it was worse than they thought.
Yeah, so from a government's point of view, I mean, what we also did was we really, initially, I mean, our curve was quicker and sharper than anywhere else in the country. We were just focusing, I said right up front, I don't want people, in cars in the parking lot because there's no beds in the hospitals. Yeah. I don't want the piling of coffins all over the place, what we've seen in other countries. Yeah. So that's what we've got to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's what we did. We made sure we had, from the hospitalization space, the testing and triage. I mean, we tested and tested and tested. That was a big focus in the beginning. We created the extra hospital beds and more than we needed. Every time we saw that's where it should be, we increased the numbers. We made sure we weren't going to run out of PPE or oxygen. And we did all those things that we're supposed to do. And then when we were over the kind of real crunch time, and I mean, it was crunch time. It was, if you speak to any of the healthcare professionals, they will say to you, it was hectic. Yeah. But as soon as we got past that real crunch, then what happened is our whole team started refocusing. And so, for example, I can talk about, all the other comorbidities, but let's just focus on diabetes. So we then said, all right, well, let's treat diabetes differently, or hypertension or whatever else, but let's treat diabetes differently. If you're at risk, we want to get ahead of the curve. So if you lived in a high density community, people around you were getting sick, you weren't sick yet, we would take you out and put you into a hospital and treat your erratic sugar, or we would quarantine you to keep you safe. So we started being proactive. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, quite scary, those early statistics. If you were a diabetic and you ended up in ICU in those early times, you actually didn't come out. You didn't survive. I mean, the numbers were crazy. If you were put on a ventilator.
I listened to Prof. Joel Dave on one of your updates, and he was saying the number, like, people are presenting too late, and so the numbers, by the time people with diabetes are presenting, they're too sick, and it was in the 40% who were not coming out again. It was just terrifying.
Now it's like 3%. It's like it really is amazing. So get ahead of it. Make sure that if you know that your sugar's not under control, go and speak to one of our health professionals. Let's protect you. Let's get your sugars right, because that we know that is going to. If you get COVID-19 and we've already put those in place, you'll survive.
Yeah, makes a huge difference. And how are you managing your blood sugar now? So you said you were back on metformin. How many times a day do you test? Are you still testing every hour?
Yeah, I'm not able to do it all the time, but I'll tell you what I have done, and I've got to go and get it again, is what I did use is one of those patches.
Oh, the Freestyle Libre. I've got one here.
Those are
unbelievable,
amazing.
aren't they? I know. It makes such a difference, because especially if you love data. So much data.
Yes. But so then your doctor gets a printout, you've got one. You just know that you've got this thing under control. So it really is, the way to go. What we've got to do now is make sure that they become freely accessible and available to.
Yeah. We've been petitioning medical aid.
Medical aids need publishers. They must understand how much money they're going to save if they could actually get people to manage through these kind of new technologies. That's what's got to happen.
Because if you think about hitting the curve before it happens, that's exactly what this gives you the potential to do. You can see, it's almost like you could see your life's health. And before any complications even start arising, you would be able to have early warning signs.
And surely if that's the lesson in dealing with COVID-19, surely it's the lesson in dealing with anything. Be ahead of the curve. Make sure that it's being managed properly. Because if you get that right, well, then everything else starts to fall in place.
Absolutely, yeah. So I have two last questions for you. One is, what message do you have for other diabetic South Africans? particularly those who are still feeling, because there's still a lot of fear around COVID-19. I know we're past the worst of it, particularly in the Western Cape, and it seems nationwide, but there's still a lot of fear. So what message do you have?
I think, well, if your sugar is not under control, then you need to make sure you get it under control. I'm not sure how it works in other provinces, but in this province, use our medical system if you're able to get it under control, because that drops your risk tremendously. I mean, from 40% to 3%. I mean, that's the kind of change that brings about. So that would be my main message. And my secondary message is, obviously try to manage it as best you can, change your lifestyle, because, it's something that you've got to, whatever you do today will help you in a few years' time. So, and that's the problem, is so many people, whether it's diabetes or HIV and AIDS or, whatever those things are, if it's not instant, you kind of don't worry about it. And what happens is down the line, that's when it really comes back to you. So, I mean, that would be my second message is, whatever those things are, deal with them now and don't wait until it's too late, because then you can't, it will shorten your life.
Yeah. And my final question is, what makes your life sweet?
What makes
your life sweet? Because we are Sweet Life. So we want to know what makes your life sweet.
My wife, my family, and my bicycle.
Good order. I'm glad the bicycle didn't come first.
My wife's in the next room.
And your bicycle doesn't have ears. Thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for all the great work you've done for diabetics in South Africa.
Only a pleasure. And let's keep safe and keep the curve flat. And let's deal today with what we can deal with to protect tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you, Premier Winde.